Moving on to thing number 5. Sorry, I had to check that because I know we had an extra today that I forgot
Yeah,
to
we
mention.
have an extra thing.
Thing number 5, Gary, the jobs data is corrupt. I'm shocked. I added that in there. And then you said, are you surprised? And my answer to that is absolutely not.
Yeah, there is a long standing deep knowledge investing mantra that if you're looking at government data, you're looking at lies. I'm done pretending that, it's a mistake, it's rounding, it's data collection. We're just at open lying at this point. And among the government data, some things are better than others. Like I think the PCE is probably relatively accurate. I think the CPI is probably pretty inaccurate. But the one piece of government data that is horrendous are our jobs data. To give you a sense of how bad the jobs data is, earlier this year, the Philadelphia Fed realized that they had overcounted by 800,000 jobs, almost a million jobs. How is that possible? Right? I mean, everything had to be revised. And by the way, the revisions are always in one direction. We always see great employment prints and then quietly later they're revised down. It never goes the other way. Don't tell me it's an accident. I won't believe it. So let's look at California because that is a unique mess in terms of their reporting. Preliminary reports in California were advertising huge job growth from September to December. So the fourth quarter of 2023 of 117,000 jobs. Now, some people might say, wait, that's not such a huge number, but you're used to seeing national employment data, right? We're usually seeing national employment data in the range of, a couple 100,000 jobs a month. This was California saying we've had growth of 117,000 jobs in a quarter. That's a big number. Then they revised it to a loss of 32,000 jobs. How in the world do you go from saying we gained 117,000 jobs to oops, we lost 32,000? So Andrew's going to throw up the chart. By the way, credit to him. He's the one who did the chart. When you look at this chart, what you're going to see that blue line shows the growth that was reported, what everybody thought the growth was, and that goes up. And it looks like the employment situation in California is fantastic. The red line, which is labeled early benchmark, shows, oh crap, we've revised it, and that actually has a downward slope. So you go from growing 117,000 jobs to a loss of 32,000 jobs. This is one of the most egregious examples of malfeasance, lying data that I've ever seen. And again, these are numbers that would be bad if they were national numbers, but this is just one state.
Yeah. Being that I am sitting in California, it's by no means a shock that California was so far off. Reminds me of that meme when you look around and everyone else has the answer as 2, yet you have 76 as your answer to the math problem.
Yeah.
Gary, I don't understand, and maybe it's not meant to be understood, how and who is getting it this wrong and what, if any, repercussions are there?
Well, the repercussions are none, right? You can be in government, be incompetent, and never lose your job. Somebody who I've always admired as an economist is Thomas Sowell, who actually I believe he's in California too. He's at Stanford's Hoover Institute. Um, and one of the things that Sowell talks about a lot is the lack of accountability, that people in government who pursue policies that don't work out well, they don't suffer from it. They don't lose their jobs. They don't resign in shame. They just sort of keep rolling on. At this point, though, given that the data is this bad and this consistently bad, I think we have to draw one of two conclusions. I don't know the answer. You're going to have to figure it out. Either the people doing this are incompetent and not capable of counting the number of jobs, and we either need to report differently or collect the data differently. I don't know. Or alternatively, this is intentional and it's malfeasance, that these people collect the numbers and for political reasons they want things to look good, and so they report huge job growth and then later they report the losses, the downward revisions, quietly when fewer people are watching. Given that trend, you could draw the conclusion that it's malfeasance. Before I accuse anybody of anything, I'm just going to say I don't know. All I know is the government jobs data is so inaccurate to the point that it is useless. You can't use it to figure out anything about the economy. Whether you think that's due to incompetence, data collection problems, malfeasance, I really don't know the answer. And I'm not accusing anybody of anything specific, but we are now at the point where the data is just useless. The one thing I would say, a couple weeks ago, we complimented Fed Chair Jerome Powell for
Mhm.
telling the truth in public. And I'm not being snarky. I really mean it. When asked in his press conference about their projections on the PCE, he acknowledged that they don't have a lot of confidence in their projections. And again, I'm not making fun of him. He told the truth. And I agree with him. I don't have confidence in their projections either. Um, but with remember, this is the kind of data that the Federal Reserve gets, and they have to make their decisions based on this. And with data like this and data this of this quality, it's really hard to criticize Chairman Powell for not having confidence in the Fed's projections. And I say that, I've been hard on the Federal Reserve for years. I've been critical of them, but in this case, I think Powell's telling the truth, and I think he's working with really bad data. And if you gave Rob, if you gave me this data, I'd have no confidence in my projections either.
Why even revise the data at this point, right? Like if no one's actually looking, if no one's held accountable, and if you're so far off every single time, yeah, it's just what data do they all of a sudden have to be able to revise down in a completely different direction?
The answer is if you're off by a couple 100,000 people, a couple 100,000 jobs at a time, 800,000 jobs here, 120,000 jobs in California there. Um, those errors add up over time. And if you start to be off over a few years by 5 million, 10 million, 15 million, at some point, the data becomes so bad that you
Yeah.
lose all credibility. What they need to do is they need to keep things reasonably close
Mm.
where there's some predictability for it. And I remember this was a discussion I had with my old partner from Silver Arrow, Raji Kabaz, in the early days of COVID. This is in early 2020. The market was trading off of the Chinese reports on their number of cases. And I remember talking to Raji, I said, the data is garbage. The Chinese government is making this up. This isn't even intended to be accurate, but the market was trading off of it. And so, the thing is, you need to be reasonably close. You start to get off by 5, 10 million people, 5, 10 million jobs. Once the data gets so bad, there's a point where China was saying there were like 80,000 cases in Wuhan, and there were credible reports of something like 500,000 cremations, right? And, this was for a disease with a relatively small infection fatality rate. So you knew it wasn't 80,000 cases,
Right,
right?
right,
And at that point, nobody believed the data. And so, what you don't want to have happen, if you're the government, you can get away with fudging the data. What you can't get away with is having those fudges add up over time to the point where it's just so unbelievable that nobody ever pays attention. At that point, you forget punishment. You have no credibility. You're producing numbers that nobody's willing to look at. And then your lies are useless.
right. One thing I wanted to note, Gary, when you were talking about Bank of Japan, recording of this, which should be uploaded, today's July 1st. So just something to call out there when you mentioned today.
Right.
You'll see that in the recording as well when we get these uploaded onto YouTube.